Chapter 1501. End of the Xuanqing Sect 13. Yun Yi and the young man who was considered as the younger brother of Yun Luo Feng by him were already sage god-level advanced rank spirit cultivators. Of course, with these alone, Su Jun was already scared out of his wits, and then the next scene almost made him kneel down. Countless gold-seeking hamsters appeared from nowhere and flocked to the maids of the saintly virgin tribe. Normally, such a grand scene must be chaotic, but these gold-seeking hamsters seemed to be well-trained. Under the command of their two leaders they moved in an orderly manner, pounced on the saintly virgin tribe maids, and bit them. One leader was a handsome young man, and the other was a middle-aged beautiful woman who wore a crown on her head and looked noble and dignified. Behind the handsome young man there stood a sweet girl, with a sweet smile on her face. Her cheeks dimpled as she smiled, and she was gazing affectionately at the young man in front of her. But if you thought this girl was harmless because she looked innocent and sweet, you were absolutely wrong. A Xuanqing sect disciple pounced on the girl only to be eaten alive by her. Meng, these things taste yucky. The young man turned his head and frowned when he found the girl was gnawing at the disciple's body. If you are hungry, I will ask master to give you a spirit herb. Don't eat these things or else you will have diarrhea. You can just kill him. The sweet girl blinked and nodded. Then she bit the disciple on the neck, killing him, and threw his body down. Milk tea, like this. The girl's smile was still sweet and she looked innocent, if you ignored the blood on her mouth. The young man looked back again only to see that the girl stuck out her pink tongue and licked the blood on her lips. At this moment, she looked so alluring. Cough. The hamster queen coughed in embarrassment when she saw milk tea staring lasciviously at Meng, and she said with a smile, "We'd better solve these people first, and then go help master." Her words broke milk tea's reverie. He raised his hand and hit the enemy in front of him, and his eyes became ferocious and cruel. Yes, the saintly virgin tribe was powerful, but so what? Anyone who bullied master must die. Compared with the hamsters, Yun Luo Feng was apparently not as at ease as them. Qin Yu was very strong. Even in the saintly virgin tribe, Qin Yu ranked among the best. Even with the help of Cha Cha and Hua, Yun Luo Feng still couldn't injure her. Master, this isn't working. We must find a way to solve her. Hua backed up a few steps and frowned with a touch of anxiety on her pink little face. Indeed, Qin Yu was a sage lord level intermediate rank spirit cultivator. At this level she was far more powerful than them. They could only protect Yun Luo Feng from being injured, but couldn't solve Qin Yu. Of course, Qin Yu had a hard time too. In the beginning, she thought she could easily solve Yun Luo Feng, but to her surprise, she couldn't injure her after such a long time. As Qin Yu felt more and more anxious, her face darkened. If things kept going like this, they would get the upper hand. Chapter 1502. End of the Xuanqing Sect 14. It seems that I can only use this method, Qin Yu said, and a chilly gleam flickered through her eyes. Although this method will keep me in bed for a month, it is better than being stuck here. Thinking of this, Qin Yu quickly took out a fruit from her space ring and took a bite of it without hesitation. In a blink of an eye, she released a powerful aura and a fierce gale sprang up around her. Master, watch out! Hua's face changed as she found that Qin Yu's strength was suddenly improved. She quickly rushed towards Yun Luo Feng. The moment Qin Yu struck Yun Luo Feng, she stood in front of Yun Luo Feng and blocked the attack, her childish face resolute and fearless. Before she decided to follow Yun Luo Feng, she had thought about the consequences. Following her, she would have to risk her life, and she might even die. However, she didn't regret it. Living alone for so many years, she felt her heart was filled with loneliness. However, after Yun Luo Feng appeared in her life became colorful again. She really enjoyed her company. As long as Yun Luo Feng could survive, she was willing to die. Hua. Just as Hua was going to be hit, a hand stretched out from behind and pulled her into her arms. Bletch. She vomited a mouthful of blood, which spattered on Hua's clothes. Hua widened her eyes bit by bit. Her heart trembled as she looked at the white-clad girl who pulled her in her arms. Master. Hua, how silly you are, said the girl, with a stunningly beautiful smile on her face. I want you to become my friend, not a shield. A lifelong friend. The blood on her lips was so conspicuous, just like the red moon in the sky. Cough. Young Luo Feng let out another mouthful of blood and couldn't help but heavily get down on one knee, but she still carefully protected the little girl in red in her arms. Like Mount Tai, she blocked all attacks with her back. How can you survive my attack? Qin Yu grinned coldly, reached out her hand into the sky, and a long sword shaped with spirit energy appeared in her hand. Swoosh. She waved her long sword, and in an instant, the sword struck the girl on the back like a bolt of lightning. Hua Huo's pupils suddenly constricted. She slewed her head around and looked at the sword chopping at her, and an angry gleam flashed through her eyes. Go to hell. Yes, only the deaths of these people could appease her anger. Miss, you won't have a good end going against our saintly virgin tribe. Qin Yu raised her chin haughtily and looked down at young Luo Feng coldly as if looking at a small and insignificant person. Su Jun smiled triumphantly, and a grim light flickered across his eyes. Humph, you could never defeat me. Just as the sword was going to hit young Luo Feng's back, a vine suddenly rose from the ground and knocked the sword away. Qin Yu was stunned, and she stared in astonishment at the cute little boy who suddenly appeared in front of young Luo Feng. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise and her face turned pale. You're unscathed. That was impossible. Being struck by her magic tree whip, this tree ant should not be able to fight. Why could he still stand up? At this time, little tree didn't look as innocent as he used to be. His bright eyes were filled with killing intent, and his cute chubby face was cold and murderous. With a grim voice, the little boy said word by word, "You injured my mother. Anyone who injures her must die." Chapter 1503. End of the Xuanqing sect 15. Qin Yu's face grew paler. She stepped back 2 steps and clenched her teeth. How can you resist the attack of my magic tree whip? You want to know? Little tree glared at her resentfully. That's because the material with which you made this magic tree whip is my father. The father little tree mentioned was not Yun Xiao but the tree ant that gave birth to him. Just like spirit beasts, a tree ant was able to give birth to offspring once it took the shape of a human being. Of course, those like the tree of life that had to stay within the tree forever and couldn't walk didn't have this ability. Young Luo Feng's back stiffened, and she coughed up another mouthful of blood. Her dark eyes looked so sad. She felt sad for little tree. How could she not feel the anger and hatred in little tree's heart since she had long contracted with little tree? The branches that could be made into the magic tree whip must be the most important part of a tree ant, just like a human's heart, and once they were lost the tree ant could only die. How could he not be angry, seeing his father's heart being used as a source of power by someone? You said the magic tree whip was your father, so who are you? Qin Yu was finally afraid. No one knew better about the origin of the magic tree whip than her. Was the little guy. You took away my father's heart for your own use, and now you want to injure my mother too. I will never forgive you. Swoosh. Numerous branches rose from the ground and struck against Qin Yu. Qin Yu didn't dare to confront little tree, so she quickly dodged the vines and rushed down Xuanqing Sect Mountain. However, just as she was about to escape to the mountain gate, flames suddenly sprang up and blocked the whole gate. In front of the flames, an 8-tailed fire fox stood, coldly staring at her with angry eyes. If you want to go out, go through my wall of fire. But, the little girl's voice was icy, with uncontrollable anger in it. My flame could even burn up your soul, let alone your body. If in a battle, Hua Huo might not be able to beat Qin Yu. After all, Qin Yu was a Sage Lord level intermediate rank spirit cultivator and used that fruit to forcibly enhance her strength. No matter how strong her flame was, it would be of no use because it couldn't attack Qin Yu. However, if Qin Yu wanted to escape, Hua Huo's flame could play a big role. If she wanted to pass, she must pass through the flame. Otherwise, she would never be able to leave this place. Qin Yu looked frightened, and cried angrily, "Get out of my way." Boom. Her fist was wrapped in a layer of spirit energy and hit at Hua Huo. As Hua Huo moved and dodged her attack, Qin Yu's fist went into the flames. A heart-wrenching pain came and she screamed, "Impossible! With my current strength, how can I be injured by your fire? It's impossible. You're just a Sage Lord level low-rank spirit beast." Qin Yu shook her head in disbelief. Hua Huo coldly stared at her. Though you forcibly improved your strength, the strength of your body and soul remained unchanged. You just improved your power. That's impossible. My original level surpassed yours. How could you injure me? Unfortunately, before Huo answered her question, the vines of Little Tree attacked her from behind. In the blink of an eye, her body was tied up. Chapter 1504. She was still alive. 1. What do you want? Qin Yu tried hard to break away from the vines. Her pale face was full of anger, and her beautiful eyes glared hard at Little Tree. Smack. Suddenly, Little Tree raised his hand and whipped at her body. A crisp sound echoed throughout the courtyard. Ah! Qin Yu let out a painful scream. Her beautiful and haughty face turned pale. Her body was trembling with anger and she bit her thin lips tightly. Aren't you afraid of the revenge of the saintly virgin tribe? The saintly virgin tribe? Upon hearing these 3 words, Little Tree sneered grimly. Behind him, countless vines suddenly rose and whistled in front of Qin Yu. These vines were like long whips, whipping at Qin Yu's body, and only crackling could be heard in the courtyard. Qin Yu almost passed out with her skin cut open and her flesh torn. With a trace of blood on the corner of her mouth, she resentfully glared at the people in front of her, especially Su Jun. That bastard didn't tell her that these people were so strong, or else she wouldn't have ended up like this. At this point, Su Jun was already struck dumb. His eyes were full of fear with his pupils dilated and he had almost pissed in his pants. Haha, Qin Yu suddenly sneered, a sarcastic smile hovering on her lips, and a resolute gleam flicked across her eyes. We saintly virgin tribe people would rather die than surrender. Being tortured and humiliated by you, I'd rather die. Bletch. With that, Qin Yu bit her tongue hard and blood spurted out from her mouth. Blood dyed her clothes red. She became paler and finally closed her eyes. The moment Little Tree withdrew his vines, Qin Yu's body fell down and hit the ground with a thud. Bang! Suddenly, Little Tree's knees went weak. He staggered and fell headfirst on the ground. Little Tree. Huo paused, rushed quickly to Little Tree and tightly held the little boy. What's the matter with you? Little Tree had previously said the magic tree whip Qin Yu was holding in her hand was his father. Huo, my mother is injured. Take her to the Tree of Life and heal her. As for me, Little Tree lowered his eyes, I may have to sleep for some time to repair my memory. Okay, Huo nodded and looked at Xiao Mo and others, solve the Xuanqing sect people and I'll take master to cure her wound. Swish. A pale green light suddenly covered them and their bodies gradually disappeared under the sky. Su Jun was dumbfounded. The fear in his eyes was replaced with despair. The Tree of Life. In the tree, a pale green light covered the girl's body and was healing her internal wounds. Bi Xiao put her hands against the back of young Luo Feng. A pale green glow was emanating from her palm, which was filled with soft power and vitality. I am the Tree of Life, I can bear the fruit of life, and I can heal people with my strength. Bi Xiao's voice was very soft. Fortunately, your injury is not serious. Otherwise, I could hardly cope with it. Young Luo Feng smiled and looked at her palm. I should be glad I got the spirit dragon blood before. It brought a qualitative change to my body. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to resist the attack. Chapter 1505. She was still alive too. Without the spirit dragon blood, she would have immediately died under the attack of Qin Yu. Bi Xiao, what happened to Little Tree? Looking at the sleeping boy, young Luo Feng asked in a low voice. Bi Xiao lowered her eyes. He didn't inherit the memory, because Qin Yu's magic tree whip reminded him of his father. He should have accepted the full memory before he could get out of that state, Bi Xiao said, glancing at young Luo Feng. However, you were injured which stimulated him, so he forcibly exited the inheritance process and received a backlash. Now he can only inherit the memory in his sleep. How long does he have to sleep? I don't know, maybe a year, maybe 3 years, maybe decades. Bi Xiao shook her head. He had wholeheartedly accepted her as his master since she blocked the attack on Huo with her own body. But he didn't admit it. Young Luo Feng's eyes turned to Little Tree again, and she gave a stunningly beautiful smile. I'm sure he'll be back soon. In astonishment, Bi Xiao looked up at young Luo Feng and after quite a while, she sighed and said, I haven't returned to the saintly virgin tribe for nearly 1,000 years. The saintly virgin tribe of today is not what it used to be. Young Luo Feng fell silent. Even though Bi Xiao and Xiao Bai were both members of the saintly virgin tribe, she still didn't like it. Bi Xiao gave a wry smile as if she could read young Luo Feng's mind. 1,000 years ago, though the members of the saintly virgin tribe were haughty, they were never rude. But Qin Yu just attacked you without a proper reason. After 1,000 years, the saintly virgin tribe has become strange to me. Hua stared at Bi Xiao and said angrily, how could you have the cheek to say that? Didn't you fight master without any reason too? I think the saintly virgin tribe people haven't changed much after all these years. Bi Xiao looked somewhat embarrassed. Indeed, she was not quite different from Qin Yu back then. If this happened to you, you could never know how rude you were, and only when you saw someone else do the same thing would you see how ridiculous you were. Young Luo Feng had almost recovered from her injuries, and Bi Xiao slowly withdrew her hand. At that time, young Luo Feng felt a shiver in her soul and heard the voice of Xiao Mo in her mind. Master, Su Jun escaped. Su Jun escaped. Young Luo Feng frowned and left the Tree of Life immediately. In the courtyard, the place that was burned by flames had turned black, and no one could tell the original look of the Xuanqing sect. Xiao Mo's anxious and resentful face appeared before young Luo Feng's eyes. Master, Qin Yu played a trick on us. She set a teleportation matrix around Su Jun and sent him away. A teleportation matrix? Young Luo Feng's face darkened bit by bit. Qin Yu knew about the matrix technique. She was so badly injured that she didn't even notice Qin Yu's movements. If she hadn't been injured, she would have found the matrix set by Qin Yu. But I don't understand why Qin Yu sent Su Jun away but stayed here to die. Xiao Mo's confused voice rang again. When young Luo Feng was thinking about it, Bi Xiao's crisp voice came from within her soul. Chapter 1506. She was still alive. 3. The saintly virgin tribe people are very proud. Qin Yu failed her mission and was badly tortured, so she was too ashamed to go back to the saintly virgin tribe. No, young Luo Feng shook her head, with an unfathomable gleam in her eyes. If Qin Yu really thought so, she wouldn't try to escape. I think that maybe she thought we would guard her closely, so she wouldn't have a chance to leave via the teleportation matrix, while Su Jun was different. Once Qin Yu died, we wouldn't pay much attention to him. And then, he would have a chance to escape. Young Luo Feng squatted on the ground and examined the matrix carefully. This matrix was intangible and massless. There was no mark on the ground and no stone was placed. Therefore, unless you specialized in matrices, you couldn't feel the existence of this matrix. Young Luo Feng suddenly figured it out and stood up. She stroked her chin, and her eyes were shining with a chilly gleam. Qin Yu didn't specialize in matrices. This teleportation matrix was inscribed in a charm, so it didn't need any physical media, and this teleportation matrix was designed by Zhu Qian. It seemed that she had to visit the saintly virgin tribe. As to why Qin Yu gave the survival chance to Su Jun, we were all wrong. Her death was this teleportation matrix's media. That is to say, the person holding the charm couldn't leave via the teleportation matrix. Only after she died could someone else be sent away. Before that, the saintly virgin tribe people were all killed, so the only person she could send away was Su Jun. Once Su Jun left, he would spread the news about how she was killed and the saintly virgin tribe would come to avenge her. It was no wonder that she didn't notice Qin Yu setting the matrix. That was because this matrix didn't need any physical media. As long as she died, it could be initiated automatically. Master. Xiao Mo felt his heart skip a beat. Qin Yu was so difficult to deal with. If there came more strong masters of the saintly virgin tribe, how should they cope with them? Xiao Mo, you stay in the blood spiritual pool and cultivate during this period of time. We must improve our strength as soon as possible to cope with the strong masters of the saintly virgin tribe. The blood spiritual pool was a spiritual pool in the fantasy land of the witchcraft tribe. With its help, young Luo Feng managed to become a sage god level intermediate rank spirit cultivator. At the thought of this, young Luo Feng turned to a disciple of the Xuanqing sect who was trembling with fear. This disciple was weak and merely a sage-level spirit cultivator. The clothes he wore showed that he was only an external disciple. He was the only one left of the Xuanqing sect. Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. The Xuanqing sect member got down on his knees with a bang, trembling all over. I'm just a small external disciple. I have nothing to do with your dispute with the Xuanqing sect. I don't know anything about it. Please spare my life. Young Luo Feng's eyes turned colder. You can go now. The Xuanqing sect disciple widened his eyes in bewilderment. He thought he was going to die, but now the girl said he could go. Was he dreaming? Will you really let me go? Young Luo Feng glanced at him. If you want to be with them, I can help you. Hearing this, the Xuanqing sect disciple was so frightened that he trembled and tried to rush down the mountain. Wait. Suddenly a cold voice rang behind him. He froze and turned his head like a robot, scowling sadly. Chapter 1507. She was still alive. 4. Anything else? In the breeze, the girl in a snow-white robe said lightly, tell people that the one who wiped out the Xuanqing sect is me, Yun Luofeng. Xiao Mo was not surprised at Yun Luofeng's words. He turned to her and asked, Master, do you want to spread the news that you are still alive through this person? Yun Luofeng nodded. If Su Jun didn't run away, I wouldn't let the saintly virgin tribe find me and would bring this matter to an end. She paused and continued, but since Su Jun has escaped, the saintly virgin tribe will find out that we are the ones who killed Qin Yu, so I don't need to hide now. I can take the chance to find Hong Luan and Yun Xiao. It would be extremely difficult for her to find them. But there was an easier way to have them to come forward. That was to spread the news that she was still alive. If this news reached their ears, they would try to find her following the path she had walked. Huo, burn the Xuanqing sect. Let's go. With that, the girl strode towards the distant mountain gate. The moment she walked out of the mountain gate, there came a loud noise. The whole Xuanqing sect was enveloped by gorgeous flames and even the sky was rendered red. The East Province, the governor's estate. With his hands clasped behind his back, Hong Ling stood in front of the bed. Under the cool moonlight, he looked lonely and sad. Governor. Suddenly, a voice came, and before Hong Ling allowed him to enter, a guard had pushed open the door and plopped down on his knees. Governor, I have something to report to you. What is it? Hong Ling asked in a cold voice, frowning. Since Yun Luofeng's death, Hong Luan had been exploring dangerous places just to improve her power and hadn't come back to the East Province in the last years. He was really worried about her. Governor, I heard that the Xuanqing sect of the Spirit Province was annihilated by someone. Hong Ling frowned again, and his eyes were sharp. What does this have to do with me? Don't bother me unless you have news about Luoner. But, Governor, the one who annihilated the Xuanqing sect is named Yun Luofeng. What? Hong Ling's eyes widened and he was so excited that he trembled. You heard it right, Yun Luofeng. Yes, absolutely, but I'm not sure whether this, Yun Luofeng, is that, Yun Luofeng. Ha ha, Hong Ling laughed out loud. Come on, send someone to find Luoner and tell her the good news. No matter whether they are the same person or not, this news can bring her some hope. Yes, Governor. The guard made an obeisance and was about to leave, but Hong Luan stopped him. Wait, Hong Ling smiled, send someone to the central province to tell Grandfather Jun about it. At the same time, Grandfather Jun, who was sitting sighing in a house, had heard the news before Hong Ling told him about it. Mu Dong, did you hear it? It said that the Xuanqing sect of the Spirit Province was annihilated, and the person who did it was Fenger. Mu Dong sneered and taunted, how do you know the person who annihilated the Xuanqing sect is that girl? Maybe it's just another person with the same name. Chapter 1508. She was still alive. 5. Grandfather Jun's face immediately changed, and he said angrily, what the heck do you know? Do you know how I got through these years? How I wished that girl was still alive. But unfortunately, no news I heard brought me any hope. Now, I finally have some hope, so I will never give it up. Mu Dong sighed, are you going back to the Spirit Province? Yes, I'm going back to verify the news. You really should go back. The Jun family is in trouble. Those who had been bullied by you are trying to get even with you. Grandfather Jun got up from his chair and sneered, I'll go back and visit those powers one by one. I just lived in seclusion these years. Did they think I am dead? I'll make them pay for what they did. In fact, thanks to Grandfather Jun, the Jun family had the present status. If not for fear of Grandfather Jun, perhaps even weak powers like the Xuanqing sect would have dared to make trouble for the Jun family. So, if Grandfather Jun died, the Jun family would become vulnerable. Jun Lingtian, if you need help, let me know and I will go to the Spirit Province to help you. Mu Dong looked at his old friend and said with great seriousness. Thanks for taking me in these years. Grandfather Jun patted Mu Dong on the shoulder. When I find my granddaughter and bring her back, please go to the Jun family and have a drink with me. Mu Dong opened his mouth but finally kept silent. Living with him all these years, he knew how much pain the old man felt. Now he finally had some hope, which was also a good thing for him. Okay, then I will go to the Jun family and have a drink with you. In a small town, the pedestrians couldn't help but glance at a girl in the middle of the road, and they were all stunned at her beauty. It was a girl in a yellow robe who looked young but noble. With her long black hair fluttering in the breeze, she was as beautiful as an elf. Hey, have you heard that the Xuanqing sect of the Spirit Province was annihilated some time ago? People were discussing the latest news. Hearing this, the pedestrians who were looking at the girl all turned their eyes to the speaker. A man next to him asked, "The Xuanqing sect? I heard their master is a sage lord-level spirit cultivator. Who on earth was so powerful as to annihilate it?" Their conversation had nothing to do with the girl in yellow, who didn't even turn her head. But at the next moment, she suddenly stopped. It's not a secret on the continent, but the town we live in is a bit isolated, so I only heard about it recently. It's said that the Xuanqing sect was annihilated by a woman named Luo Feng. Swish. No sooner had the young man said this than he saw the beautiful girl in yellow suddenly appear before him. She looked very excited, grabbed him by the collar and asked anxiously, Luo Feng. Did you just say that the person who annihilated the Xuanqing sect was named Luo Feng? Was Luo Feng still alive? Huang Yingying's lips were trembling and tears almost burst out of her eyes, but she tried to hold them back. The young man was stunned. I just heard about it. A survivor of the Xuanqing sect said it. I don't know about the details. Chapter 1509, 2 Jade Pendants. 1. Huang Yingying's hands slowly loosened, but she couldn't hold back her tears. She covered her mouth with her hand and tears flowed down through her fingers. She's alive. She's still alive. Quote. No one knew how sad she was when she heard about Luo Feng's death. If it hadn't been for her, she wouldn't be where she was now. The young man was amazed to see the yellow-clad girl suddenly disappear from his view. When he looked around for her, she had reached the gate and left the little town. Some were happy at the news about Luo Feng, while some not. The North Province. In the governor's estate, in the bed shrouded with red satin, Ling Chen was sitting on top of a beautiful, delicate girl. In the past, facing such a beautiful, delicate girl, Ling Chen would have treated her very tenderly. However, since he was whipped by Little Tree in the East Province last time, he became impotent. He angrily pushed the woman off the bed and shouted, get out of here." The woman was so scared that she trembled and got up. She ran out of the room before putting on her clothes. Ling Chen clenched his fists. His once gentle face was filled with anger and hatred. Even with my father's help, I still can't find out who beat me that night. Luo Feng, if it weren't for her, Hong Luan would have been my wife. Fortunately, he heard that the woman died in the witchcraft tribe, which amused him a lot. Young master, young master. Suddenly, a servant hurried in. He staggered and almost fell to his knees. Young master, something bad happened. The Xuanqing sect of the Spirit Province was annihilated and it's said that the person who did it was Luo Feng. What? Bang. Kicking over a table, Ling Chen gnashed his teeth and anger welled up within him. Luo Feng, that damn bitch didn't die. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I don't believe it. I'll never believe it. Ling Chen completely went mad. He held his head and screamed angrily, his face ferocious and his eyes bloodshot. The servant was scared. He had never expected that this news would strike young master so hard. No, he must tell the governor about it, or else young master might go crazy. Without any hesitation, the servant hurried out to tell the governor about it. Though the news was a blessing to many people, the North Province government was in a mess because of it. The Jun family, the Spirit Province. In a desolate valley not far away, a group of people in different styles of clothes were discussing something in low voice. Their leader was a man with an ape-like face. With an insidious gleam in his eyes, he said in a low voice, "We are going to reach the Jun family. This time, we must destroy it." Leader, though Grandfather Jun is not in the Jun family, he is a well-known strong master. If we attack the Jun family, will he seek revenge on us? Hearing this, the ape-faced man frowned and said impatiently, didn't you know the Qin sect of the South Province, the Ruthless Valley, the Purple Cloud sect of the North Province, and the Green Thunder clan have united to attack the Jun family? Besides, I heard that the granddaughter of Grandfather Jun has been caught by the Green Thunder clan. Chapter 1510. 2 Jade Pendants. 2. Oh. The crowd gasped. If it was true, then the Jun family would be in big trouble. Everyone knew that Grandfather Jun left the Jun family to search for his biological daughter many years ago. How could he abandon his granddaughter if he learned about her whereabouts? As the Green Thunder clan had caught the girl, the Jun family people would have to surrender to them. Leader, is this news reliable? We don't want to be killed by the Jun family people. Someone couldn't help but ask. It is absolutely reliable. Some time ago, it was said that the Grandfather Jun's daughter was still alive. And someone had even seen a girl holding Grandfather Jun's jade pendant. It is said that the girl is his granddaughter. The ape-faced man paused and continued, not long ago, the Green Thunder clan found a woman holding that jade pendant on which there was inscribed a Jun. That woman told people that she was the lost daughter of the Jun family. Hearing this, the other men became confident and held great hope for this trip. Suddenly, a man saw a branch of an old tree in front of him move. His face greatly changed and he snapped, "Who is it?" The crowd all turned their eyes to the old tree. In the tree, a woman slowly sat up, her white robe fluttering in the breeze. She leaned languidly against the tree and glanced sideways down at the crowd. "You're affecting my rest." Shocked by her beauty, the crowd was staring intently at this stunningly beautiful woman. They had never seen anyone who was so beautiful, especially her languid and wicked voice. Hearing her voice, they felt their heart was itchy as if a hand was gently stroking their heart. "You there," the ape-faced man recovered from his trance and frowned, "I'm sorry to disturb you, but you heard our conversation, so you'll have to cut your tongue and disable both arms. Otherwise, we can't let you go." This woman had heard their conversation. If they didn't force her to do this, it would be troublesome if she leaked the information to the Jun family. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and looked down at the crowd with a faint smile. "Before I do that, I have some questions for you." She smiled. "First, you said that there was a woman holding the Jun family's jade pendant and claiming to be Grandfather Jun's granddaughter." The ape-faced man sneered, "It seems you've heard a lot. Have you seen the jade pendant?" "Of course not. Have you finished your nonsense? If you have, do it now." Looking at the man's impatient face, young Luo Feng smiled again. "Okay, the second question, how do you expect me to do it?" "Isn't that nonsense? First cut your tongue with a knife and then disable your arms so that you can't speak or write with your hands. Then I don't have to worry about you leaking the news to the Jun family." "Okay," the woman slightly nodded, "since you've demanded it, I should satisfy you." Hearing this, the man smiled with satisfaction. The woman was quite sensible. Maybe he could spare her life. Swish. The man looked up only to find that the white-clad woman in the tree had disappeared. The next second, a sword went across his wrist and he uttered a heart-rending cry. Chapter 1511. 2 Jade Pendants. 3. Swish. As he opened his mouth, the sword was stuck into his mouth, and then his tongue fell out. "Ah!" Quote. The man covered his bloody mouth and stared in horror at the white woman standing in front of him. The woman was standing still, and her snow-white robe remained stainless. However, in these people's eyes, she was no different from a devil. "You said you wanted me to cut your tongue and disable your arms." Young Luo Feng shrugged and gave a wicked chuckle, "So I did what you asked for. Are you satisfied?" The man retreated a few steps. His face was ghastly pale and he trembled, but he couldn't make any sound. Young Luo Feng raised her eyes and turned to look at the others. Struck dumb, these people shivered under her stare. How many powers are going to attack the Jun family? Young Luo Feng's voice was cold but made everyone tremble with fear. "There were 11 of them," replied a black-robed young man. "In addition to the 4 powers we just mentioned, there are other powers on the continent, all of whom have been offended by the Jun family but didn't dare to seek revenge for fear of Grandfather Jun. They didn't move until the Green Thunder clan caught the woman suspected to be Grandfather Jun's granddaughter." Quote. He used the word suspected, so whether the woman was grandfather Jun's granddaughter or not remained to be verified. After the young man said this, he suddenly found that the white-clad woman, who was coldly questioning him, suddenly disappeared. One person asked aloud, "Are we going to the Jun family?" "Go to hell." The man who said this must be a rough man. "Didn't you see that leader was almost killed? It's like courting death to go to the Jun family. If we meet that crazy woman again, we'll all be killed." The man looked at the crowd and continued, "If the Jun family is going to be annihilated, we won't change anything if we go there. But if they aren't, we will lose our lives." Agreeing with his opinion, they ignored the shrieking ape-faced man and went back. Inside her soul, Xiao Mo's voice rang, "Master, according to the words of these people, we can be sure that the owner of the jade pendant is grandfather Jun's granddaughter, just as the governor of the East Province said." Young Luo Feng didn't confess her identity to grandfather Jun at first because she was not sure what the jade pendant had to do with the Jun family. What if the jade pendant didn't belong to grandfather Jun, but to someone else? After all, she heard that grandfather Jun had a younger brother, who tried to have him assassinated in order to seize power. Moreover, he conspired with the previous governor of the Spirit Province and broke up grandfather Jun's family. She was afraid that Jun Fengling was not related to grandfather Jun but to his enemy, so she didn't dare to act rashly. Though Hong Ling told her that the jade pendant was very important, he just said that she might find some useful information if she went to the Jun family. He didn't say the jade pendant was grandfather Jun's. The only thing she could be sure of was that the jade pendant had belonged to Jun Fengling since she was born. If my jade pendant belongs to grandfather Jun, then what about the one that woman holds? Young Luo Feng took the jade pendant out of her arms and held it tightly. She frowned and pondered. Chapter 15:12. Two Jade Pendants. 4. Master, if you don't know the authenticity of the jade pendant you hold, you can go to the Jun family and wait for grandfather Jun to return. He will tell you which one is real. Yes, perhaps this is the only way, young Luo Feng said, putting away the jade pendant, but, just in case, I can't show the jade pendant to others. If this jade pendant isn't from the Jun family it will cause me trouble. Xiao Mo nodded. Hong Ling was just an outsider, so they couldn't be sure that this jade pendant was from the Jun family just because there was a Jun inscribed on it. Besides, there was another woman holding a jade pendant. Even young Luo Feng was not sure whether her jade pendant was really related to the Jun family. If it was not, wasn't it embarrassing? Master, let's go to the Jun family now and wait for grandfather Jun to come back. He will tell us whether that woman is really his granddaughter. If she is, we can leave. If she is not, you can show him the jade pendant. This was the safest way. Young Luo Feng no longer hesitated, and quickly set off for the Jun family. The Jun family. Jun Zan coldly stared at the strong masters who stood in the sky and surrounded the Jun family, his face somber. Behind him stood all strong masters of the Jun family, confronting the people in the sky. Linger stood behind her father in silence with a touch of anxiety on her pretty little face. She looked at the sky from time to time, with a worried gleam in her bright eyes. Why hasn't Grandpa come back yet? If he doesn't come back, maybe the Jun family won't be able to survive. Linger, it's all right, said a handsome man standing next to her, tightly holding Jun Ling's hand and giving her a reassuring smile. Believe in Uncle's ability. I believe we'll get through this. Jun Linger nodded and her eyes remained worried. Yifei, if we're going to lose, just leave with your mother. I will be with the Jun family dead or alive. This Jun family was created by Grandpa, and she would never leave here. Linger, don't be silly, I will never leave you behind. I believe Aunt is the same. Quote. Hua Yifei looked affectionately at Jun Linger, and his eyes were filled with love for her. As the nephew of Jun Ling's mother, he had been in love with Linger since childhood. Just in a few years, he would marry her. But no one expected that this would happen. Ha ha ha. In the sky, someone was guffawing. He laughed very arrogantly as if he didn't take the powerful Jun family seriously. Jun Zan, old Jun is not here. I'd like to see how you get through this. Jun Zan sneered, even though my father isn't here, so what? As the master of the Jun family, I will not let you damage the Jun family in any way. His voice was loud and strong. Humph, I'd like to see how long you can persist. Come on, let's kill the bastards of the Jun family. The man gave a sneer and headed towards Junzan. A war was going to break out. On the streets of Jun City, the residents all rushed home. They didn't dare to even look at those people for fear that they would be injured by them. Yifei, please take care of Linger for me. Protect her when we begin to fight with them, said Junzan in a low voice, looking at the enemy rushing at him. Chapter 15:13, 2 Jade Pendants. 5. Don't worry, uncle, I'm not going to let anyone touch Linger, Hua Yifei said with great seriousness. Junzan didn't want to allow Linger to participate in the war, but Linger said she wanted to be with the Jun family dead or alive and insisted coming here with him, refusing his advice. He had no choice but let Hua Yifei protect her. Fighting the enemies, Hua Yifei looked at Jun Linger from time to time. Shocked by her strength, he was a bit relieved. Linger followed grandfather Jun traveling north and south all these years, so her strength had improved a lot. She was no longer a little girl hiding behind him. At this moment, Hua Yifei didn't know whether he was proud or frustrated. In a word, if he didn't work harder, he would be surpassed by her in the future. Yifei, take care of yourself. Don't worry about me, said Ling, wiping the spattered blood from her face. Her voice was as clear and sweet as a nightingale, I won't make my grandpa lose face. As the Jun family's descendant, how could she be weak? She was cultivated by grandfather Jun. If she couldn't defeat these people, wouldn't it be a disgrace to grandfather Jun? Hua Yifei nodded. Linger's strength had really improved a lot. So he was relieved and began to focus on fighting the enemy in front of him. I didn't expect Junzan's strength was not bad. An elder of the Green Thunder clan said coldly, and a grim light flickered across his eyes, if things keep going like this, it will be unfavorable for us. After all, though the Jun family has many enemies, it also has many friends. If those people come to help them, I'm afraid they'll kill us all. With the thought of this, the elder blinked, retreated a few steps and said with a sneer, Junzan, I heard that your Jun family found Jun Lingtian's granddaughter some time ago. Does it have anything to do with you? Junzan said sarcastically. The granddaughter of your Jun family, of course, has nothing to do with me, but unfortunately, that girl is in our hands. What? Junzan was shocked by the news. He didn't even notice the attack striking against him. With a thud, he was hit. He retreated a few steps and vomited a mouthful of blood. Dad. Uncle. Jun Linger and Hua Yifei both changed their faces. They rushed to Junzan and helped him up. Dad, are you all right? Jun Linger was so worried that she almost cried. She nervously looked at Junzan with red eyes. If it was before, Junzan would never let his daughter cry, but now he didn't even pay attention to her. He unblinkingly stared at the elder, his eyes red. What did you say? My poor niece is in your hands. The elder of the Green Thunder clan uttered a sneer, yes, I've already checked the jade pendant she holds. It really belongs to your Jun family. Give me the jade pendant. Give it to me. Junzan slowly straightened up and clenched his fists, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Jade pendant. The elder gave a sneer. With a wave of his hand, a piece of jade pendant appeared in his hand. Junzan only saw the word, Jun, engraved on the jade pendant from a distance, but he couldn't see it clearly. He quickly rushed to him and tried to grab the jade pendant from his hand. Crack. The elder suddenly squeezed the jade pendant hard, and it immediately turned into jade powder and floated in the air. Chapter 15:14, 2 Jade Pendants. 6. No. Junzan's eyes widened, and his clenched hands kept trembling. His eyes were fierce and ferocious, go to hell. This jade pendant was the only way to verify the girl's identity. Now it was crushed to powder by the man. How could he verify her identity? You want the jade pendant back? In your dreams, I've destroyed the only token. What can you do to me? The elder sneered and waved, come on, bring that woman here. In a moment, 2 guards escorted a woman from behind. The woman was tied up. She looked pale and glazed. Obviously, she was greatly frightened these days. Boo-hoo. The moment she saw the Jun family people, she cried out loud, Uncle, help me. Hearing that, Junzan felt his heart twitch, You my master's granddaughter. In fact, as soon as the Green Thunder clan people brought the green-clad woman here, Junzan believed she was his niece. After all, if they were not sure of it, they wouldn't dare to bring her here. Unfortunately, he didn't see the jade pendant clearly. Of course, if the jade pendant was merely crushed and its powder was still there, he could tell whether the jade pendant was real or not by its texture. However, the powder had been blown away by the wind and scattered all over. It was impossible for him to collect it. The green-clad woman cried miserably, her face pale. My mother told me not long ago that I was not her biological daughter, but adopted. Then she gave me this jade pendant and asked me to go to the Jun family to find my family. Quote. In fact, as the news that grandfather Jun's granddaughter was on the continent of 7 provinces was spread, the entire continent had known of her existence, as well as the pattern of the jade pendant. One day the green-clad woman Xiao Yikan was utterly disappointed because her lover sarcastically told her that she was too lowly. She went back to her mother in anger and asked her why she found such a useless husband and made her beloved man ridicule her. A few days later, her mother handed her the jade pendant and told her that she was, in fact, grandfather Jun's granddaughter. She was so surprised that she could not help showing off it to the man who ridiculed her. However, she ran into someone of the Green Thunder clan, who took her away and imprisoned her. From the beginning to the end, Xiao Yikan never doubted the authenticity of the jade pendant. She had forgotten that her mother was a sculptor. Carving a jade pendant according to a pattern was quite easy for her. The Green Thunder clan people didn't expect that, under such circumstances, someone would dare to pretend to be grandfather Jun's granddaughter, not to mention that someone could make a fake jade pendant so similar to the real one. The only difference, presumably, was the texture, but the Green Thunder clan people didn't know about the texture of young Luo Feng's jade pendant. As for Jun Zan, he never touched the jade pendant. How could he tell its authenticity? Let her go. Jun Zan had already believed and snapped, if you dare to touch a hair of hers, there won't be enough of you left to bury. Ha ha, the elder laughed contemptuously, I spent a lot of time and energy to catch this girl. How can I easily let her go? Unless you're willing to cut your throat before my eyes. Chapter 15:15, 2 Jade Pendants. 7. Dad. Jun Linger's heart trembled. She tightly held Jun Zan's hand and desperately shook her head. Dad, don't. Looking at the elder's old face, Jun Zan smiled. If this girl is really my niece, I'm willing to die for her so as not to make my master sad. Unfortunately, the jade pendant has been destroyed by you. I cannot confirm whether she is really my poor niece. Jun Zan's eyes sparkled, so, I can't make any decision until my father returns. The elder sneered, do you think I'll be deceived by your delaying tactics? Now I only give you a chance, cut your throat before my eyes. Otherwise, I will kill this girl. He raised his hand and grabbed Xiao Yikan by the collar. Spiritual energy gathered in his hand and with a single strike, Xiao Yikan would die. No, I don't want to die. Uncle, help me. Xiao Yikan cried out anxiously, I am really your niece. Trust me. Seeing that the elder of the Green Thunder was going to kill Xiao Yikan, Jun Zan hurriedly cried and his face changed, stop. Sure enough, the elder stopped and glanced at Jun Zan with a sneer. What about it? Have you made a decision? Jun Zan took a deep breath and turned his eyes to Jun Linger. He raised his hand and stroked the girl's crying face. Ling, master gave me my life. I am willing to die for him. Dad. Linger held Jun Zan tightly and tears filled her face. I don't want you to die. I don't want you to die. Bang. Jun Zan raised his hand and pushed Linger away. Hua Yifei immediately stepped forward and hugged Linger's trembling body tightly. Okay. Jun Zan slowly turned around and looked up at the sinister face of the elder. I'll do what you asked me to do, but I hope you will keep your promise and let her off. Even if the Jun family was annihilated, his niece would survive. Over the years, Master had taken great pains searching for this girl. Now he finally found his niece. How could he let her leave again? Yifei, let me go, I can't lose my father. Ling, struggling in Hua Yifei's arms, looked desperate and sad, don't make me hate you. Hua Yifei's heart trembled when he heard she said, hate you. Since childhood, Linger loved clinging to him, and never said she would hate him. Linger, this is Uncle's decision. We can't stop him. You will be injured if you step forward. Hua Yifei's heart ached. How could he watch his uncle die? But they had no other choice. No. Seeing that Junzan had walked to the elder, Linger screamed herself hoarse. Xiao Yikan, who looked frightened, had a look of relief and hope on her face. As long as uncle was willing to die, she would be able to survive. Uncle, thank you, I will inherit the Jun family for you and accompany my grandpa around. Xiao Yikan's identity hadn't been confirmed by grandfather Jun, but she was sure that she was his granddaughter. So, she would be the only eligible heiress to the Jun family. Jun Linger wouldn't have any chance. She was just the daughter of grandfather Jun's disciple. How could she compare with her, the real descendant of the Jun family? Even now, Xiao Yikan still couldn't believe that she had transformed from a sparrow to a phoenix and became the heiress to the Jun family from a nobody. Chapter 15-16. 2 Jade Pendants. 8. Jun Linger's heart trembled and she glared at Xiao Yikan. If it were not for her, the Jun family would not be thrown into disarray, and her father would not have to save her with his life. How could she say something like this, without feeling guilty at all? If Xiao Yikan could read Jun Ling's mind, she would sneer at her thoughts. Guilty? Why? Though Junzan was master of the Jun family, he was only a disciple of grandfather Jun. The Jun family raised him. Shouldn't he pay them back? Why should she be grateful? Linger, she is grandfather Jun's granddaughter. We have no choice. Hua Yifei's voice rang in Jun Ling's ear, which broke Jun Ling's reverie. Yes, this woman was Grandpa's granddaughter. They couldn't abandon her. No one knew better than her how much grandfather Jun had suffered over the years. How could she watch grandfather Jun continue to suffer in pain? Dad. Jun Linger calmed down, and glared at the man standing in front of Junzan. I swear one day I'll avenge you. She would kill every enemy here. Humph. The elder snorted, his face expressionless. Junzan, can you start now? Junzan closed his eyes. After a long time, he opened them. Yifei, you and Linger were engaged since childhood, and you've been in love. Now, I want you to promise me that you will be faithful to her forever, never let her down and keep no concubine. Can you do it? As a father, before he died, the one he worried about most was his daughter. Uncle, Hua Yifei's eyes turned red, I swear I will not disappoint Linger. I'll have her as my only woman. Good, then, I'm relieved. Quote. With a smile on his face, Junzan waved his hand and a long sword appeared in his hand. And he closed his eyes again. Dad, Jun Linger cried sadly again, her body was trembling violently, an endless hatred and anger filled her little heart. Junzan wanted to look back at his daughter again, but he was afraid that he would lose the courage to commit suicide if he did this, so he forced himself not to turn back and put the sword against his neck. Brothers on. Suddenly, an anxious female voice came from the door. Hearing it, Junzan shuddered but in the end, he said nothing. At the door, a beautiful woman stood against the door and gazed at Junzan tearfully. She wanted to come up to stop her husband, but darkness came over her eyes, and she almost fell. Brothers on, don't, quote. His wife and daughter are the most precious treasure of him, but now he had to abandon them. Only in return for master's kindness. Why haven't you started yet? The elder became impatient. If you don't do it now, I'll kill the girl. Junzan looked at him and said in a low voice, let her go. I'll cut my throat right before your eyes. And after that, he moved. The Jun family is really busy today. Am I late? At this moment, a lazy voice came from the sky. Junzan's hand trembled, but he didn't raise his head. The long sword in his hand had left a bloody mark on his neck. How can you surrender to a threat? Is the master of the Jun family only capable of this? Boom. In an instant, countless vines stretched out from the ground. Before Junzan could respond, the sword in his hand had been taken away. Chapter 15-17. 2 Jade Pendants. 9. The elder also had no time to respond. He felt his hand suddenly loosened and Xiao Yikan, who had been held by him, was snatched away and thrown to the Jun family people by the vines. Xiao Yikan screamed in terror. She quickly closed her eyes, but the next second, she felt herself falling into a hug, and she carefully opened her eyes. A handsome face came into her sight. The man holding her was in a brocade robe and looked genteel and handsome, like the dream lover of most women. The man she once loved was no match for this man. At the thought of this, Xiao Yikan blushed and lowered her head shyly. However, Hua Yifei, after saving her, put her aside and never looked at her again. His eyes were fixed on Junlinger. Seeing this, Xiao Yikan gnashed her teeth. She was the biological granddaughter of Grandfather Jun. How could Junlinger be compared with her? When Grandfather Jun saw her, he would surely dote on her out of the guilt and affection for her. At that time, as long as she requested, Grandfather Jun would surely order Junlinger to annul the engagement with him. Xiao Yikan was in a good mood. She was different now. No one could look down upon her. In the air, the white-clad woman stood still, and she looked completely unruly and domineering. "It's you." Junlinger was stunned, staring at young Luo Feng in the air. "I heard that you had died in the witchcraft tribe. Linger, do you know this girl?" Junzan was very pleased to see young Luo Feng save Xiao Yikan. He quickly asked when he heard what she said. "Dad, this is the genius I told you about." Junling was relieved. She is also Grandpa's foster granddaughter. Xiao Yikan slightly frowned. Why did the old man of the Jun family take another foster granddaughter besides Junlinger? In particular, it seemed that Junlinger was very familiar with her, which upset her a lot. Wasn't Junlinger supposed to fawn on her? She was the biological granddaughter of Grandfather Jun. Where did this stupid foster granddaughter come from? How could she become the center of attention upon her appearance? "Miss Yun, nice to meet you," Junzan said with a smile and made an obeisance. "Thank you for your help. May I ask why you are visiting us?" Ellipsis quote. Young Luo Feng thought for a while and said, "I came to see Grandfather Jun. My master is not in the Jun family now. If you'd like, you can wait for him here. I think he'll come back soon if he knows you have come to visit him." Junzan met young Luo Feng for the first time, but Linger had told him about her. From her words, he could tell that Linger worshipped and admired her a lot. If she could stay in the Jun family for some time, maybe Linger could learn from her. Humph. The elder coldly snorted, turned his grim eyes to young Luo Feng and impatiently interrupted them. "Girl, if you dare to help the Jun family, you are the enemy of our Green Thunder clan. You'd better think about the consequences." The Green Thunder clan? Young Luo Feng smiled indifferently. "Aren't you the punching bag of the Jun family? If you can defeat the Jun family, why did you resort to these underhanded means?" The elder trembled all over with anger. He almost succeeded, but this girl ruined his plan and prevented him from taking action. How could he let her get away with this? Chapter 15:18. Arrogance of a Counterfeit 1. Young Luo Feng turned a deaf ear to him and stepped down from the sky on the breeze. The sky was far away from the ground. However, in the crowd's eyes, it seemed like it took her only a few steps to be in front of Junlinger. Perhaps because they hadn't seen each other for a long time, Junlinger was very happy, and even she didn't know why she felt close to her since she met young Luo Feng for the first time. There was something in the girl that attracted her. "Miss Yun," said Junzan, who also ignored the furious elder and looked at young Luo Feng with a smile, "You are our guest. Let Linger take you to rest. We'll take care of the things here." Young Luo Feng slightly nodded. She had no intention to get involved in the Jun family's affairs. However, she could not let Junzan die here, because she wanted to find out the relationship between the Jun family and Jun Fengling, so she helped him. "The Green Thunder clan," said Junzan with a sneer, turning to the elder, "you came to provoke us while my master is away and then threatened to kill my niece. Now let me settle these accounts with you." Those strong masters besieging the Jun family all changed their faces. They never expected this situation. "Elder, bad news." Suddenly, an anxious voice came from behind him. A disciple of the Green Thunder clan staggered in, his face full of panic. "I have just received news that the Wind Fire sect and many other sects have reached the city gate and are about to enter the city." "What?" The elder turned pale. Though they couldn't defeat the Jun family, it would be no problem for them to escape. However, with the presence of the Wind Fire sect and the other sects, they would be doomed. "Run!" Clenching his teeth, the elder issued the order and hastily fled towards the city gate. Unfortunately, before he could leave Jun City, numerous figures had appeared in the sky and surrounded him. He had no way to escape. "Master Jun, I'm sorry I am late, please forgive us, haha." The leading man was a handsome, middle-aged man. His laughter was loud and clear and echoed over Jun City. The Jun family had many enemies, but at the same time, Grandfather Jun helped even more people. Hearing that the Jun family was under attack, they were all out to help the Jun family. You came just in time. Please help me kill these people. Jun Zan laughed. Master Jun, please rest assured, we won't let any of them escape. Boom. The handsome middle-aged man waved his hand and in an instant, a large number of people rushed out from behind him and launched fierce attacks on the Green Thunder clan and the other powers. This war was bound to cause untold death and bloodshed, but most of them deserved it. No matter how intense the war was in the city, young Luo Feng didn't pay any attention to it and just followed Jun Linger into the gate of the Jun family. Linger, Yifei. The beautiful woman standing against the door hurried towards them and tightly held their hands. After checking their bodies, she was relieved. She turned to young Luo Feng and smiled, Miss, thank you. You saved my husband. It was no trouble. Young Luo Feng smiled mildly and answered in a tone neither humble nor haughty that made people feel comfortable. Chapter 1519. Arrogance of a Counterfeit 2. Mom, said Jun Linger, supporting the beautiful woman with her hand, you're in poor health. Let Yifei help you back to have a rest. I will take care of Miss Yun and. Quote. Jun Linger paused and turned to Xiao Yikan only to find that her face was filled with disdain, and she frowned. However, thinking of Xiao Yikan's identity, she could only endure it, no matter how discontented she was with her. This Xiao, quote. I am the heiress of the Jun family. You should call me Miss, but as you are the foster granddaughter of my grandpa, I will allow you to call me sister. Jun Linger scowled and her bright eyes were full of anger. She had followed her grandfather for so many years and had never been so angry. Linger, the beautiful woman hastily held Ling's hand, gave her a wink and smiled at Xiao Yikan, you've suffered a lot all these years. I know it's not easy for you. Now let the maids take you to your room to have a rest. She asked maids instead of her daughter to take Xiao Yikan to her room. This showed that Xiao Yikan and young Luo Feng had very different statuses in her mind. Had Xiao Yikan not been grandfather Jun's granddaughter, she wouldn't have been so polite to her. However, Xiao Yikan didn't notice the different attitudes with which the beautiful woman treated her and young Luo Feng and still lifted her chin like a proud peacock. Watching the maids leading Xiao Yikan away, Jun Linger stomped angrily, Mom, why does grandpa have such a granddaughter? She preferred young Luo Feng to Xiao Yikan. The beautiful woman gently smiled, only when your grandpa comes back can we confirm whether she is really a descendant of the Jun family. For now, let's just satisfy her demands. Mom, you mean, Jun Ling blinked, and a bright smile appeared on her cute little face. We haven't seen the jade pendant after all, right? How can we be sure that she is really your grandpa's granddaughter just because the Green Thunder clan said she was? Anyway, I only trust your grandfather. Let's wait for him to come back. Jun Ling gave a beautiful smile, and her eyes were as clear as springs. Mom, I hope that Xiao Yikan is not grandpa's granddaughter. If she wasn't mistaken, when Yifei saved Xiao Yikan, she looked at him coyly and almost threw herself on him. The more Jun Linger thought of it, the angrier she was. She could not help glaring at Hua Yifei. Not knowing what he did wrong, Hua Yifei was confused. He was afraid that Jun Linger might be angry with him, so he hurriedly held the beautiful woman's hand and said softly, Aunt, let me help you back to your room. Glancing at the two, the beautiful woman wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything and just smiled demurely, okay, thank you, Yifei. After they left, Jun Linger affectionately took young Luo Feng's arm and gave her a bright smile. Though I just met you for the second time, I think I really like you. May I call you Sister Yun? Young Luo Feng raised her eyes only to see a pair of eyes that were as clear as water. The girl in front of her was as lively as an elf in the forest and as simple as a piece of white paper. Okay. She was not an unapproachable, cold-hearted person. If she felt good about someone, she didn't mind making friends with that person. However, she had very few real friends, and there were only several of them on this continent. Chapter 1520. Arrogance of a Counterfeit 3. Sister Yun, let me take you to your room. Saying this, she whispered in young Luo Feng's ear, just now, maids took Xiao Yikan to the west garden, so I'll arrange you a room in the east garden. I can tell that you don't like Xiao Yikan, so I guess you want to stay far away from her. Young Luo Feng smiled wickedly, but her voice was languid, let's go. When Linger took young Luo Feng to her room, the battle in the city was almost over. Suddenly, a maid rushed in and reported, "Miss, Master asks you to go to the study." "Dad wants me to see him." Ling pursed her lips. "I guess he wants to ask me about my grandfather's whereabouts. Since Sister Yun is here, Grandpa will come back soon." She still remembered how Grandfather Jun took the lead in rushing into the Poison Valley and killing everyone he saw because he thought young Luo Feng was killed by them. He was grieved by her death for many years. If he found out that she was still alive, he would surely come back to meet her. Thinking of this, Linger walked quickly towards the study. Inside the study, a middle-aged man stood in the sunshine, his hands clasped behind his back. When he heard the door open, he slowly turned around and lovingly looked at the girl walking in. "Linger, you've come." The middle-aged man raised his eyebrows. "I've received the news that your grandfather is on his way to the Jun family and he will be back in a few days." "Grandpa will be back." Ling was glad to hear the news, and a gleam of joy flickered across her eyes. "Dad, since you've heard that Grandpa is coming back, why did you call me here?" Zan gave a wry smile. "Linger, I know you don't like Xiao Yikan, but she is your grandfather's biological granddaughter. Even though you don't like her, you can't provoke her." "Dad, Mom said it's not certain whether she is really Grandpa's granddaughter or not." Linger pouted, "and I really dislike her." Zan raised his hand and stroked Ling's head, sighing helplessly. "According to the people of the Green Thunder clan, Xiao Yikan is probably your grandpa's granddaughter. Besides, even though we aren't sure of her identity, we can't be rude to her." Linger hung her head and said in an aggrieved tone, "I prefer Sister Yun to Xiao Yikan. I wish she was Grandpa's granddaughter." "It's not only you. I also think Miss Yun is a very nice person. Otherwise, your grandfather would not use all means to take her as his foster granddaughter," said Zan with a bitter smile, shaking his head. "Unfortunately, it's just our hope. After all, she is not a descendant of the Jun family." "I see," sighed Linger. "I won't provoke her, and if she provokes me, I will tolerate her." After saying this, she turned and went out of the study. Zan's heart throbbed. He didn't want to see his daughter being so aggrieved. However, Master treated him as kindly as his father. He couldn't make Master sad. After leaving the study, Linger went to the East Garden to find young Luo Feng. However, when she walked around a corner, she bumped into someone, and she couldn't help but retreat a few steps. "Ah!" Xiao Yikan screamed. When she saw that the person in front of her was Linger, she lifted her hand in anger and wanted to slap her. Linger scowled and grabbed Xiao Yikan's arm. Her voice was clear yet cold. "What are you trying to do?" Chapter 15:21. Arrogance of a Counterfeit 4. "Humph." Xiao Yikan snorted coldly with a disdainful look on her face. "You bumped into me. Shouldn't I teach you a lesson?" "You." Linger trembled with anger. However, thinking of Zan's words, she tried to calm down, though she was already furious. "I didn't mean it. I bumped into you, but you also bumped into me." Not expecting that Linger dared to refute her, Xiao Yikan was surprised and then shouted angrily, "I am the heiress to the Jun family." "Who are you? You have no Jun family's blood in you. The Jun family raised you up, but you aren't grateful at all. How dare you speak to me like this? I have suffered so many years and finally returned to the Jun family. Why am I still bullied by the ungrateful child of a bitch?" With that, Xiao Yikan cried out loud as if she was greatly wronged. If Linger was Grandfather Jun's biological granddaughter, Xiao Yikan wouldn't dare humiliate her like this. But Ling's father was only Grandfather Jun's disciple, so she dared act so presumptuously. She believed that in Grandfather Jun's mind, an outsider would be no match for her, his own blood and flesh. Even if Grandfather Jun was here, he would certainly stand by her side. "Don't you dare abuse my mother." Linger furiously raised her legs and kicked at Xiao Yikan. If Xiao Yikan only scolded her, perhaps she would bear it and go away. But she cursed her mother. How could she put up with it? "Miss Linger." Just before Linger's leg hit Xiao Yikan's chest, someone shouted and firmly grabbed her leg. "First Elder, let me go. I'm going to teach this woman a lesson." Linger's eyes turned red and were burning with raging flames. "Linger." Sweat ran down from the old man's forehead and he said anxiously, "After all, she is old master's granddaughter. No matter how wrong she was, you shouldn't beat her." In fact, since Jun Linger was the only child in the Jun family, the elders all adored her. Besides, she was an amiable and lively girl, so the elders doted on her. However, no matter how much he liked Jun Linger, he couldn't let her beat Xiao Yikan. Linger, have you forgotten how old master missed his lost daughter all these years? Do you want to make him sad? First elder said earnestly, and his eyes were sad. Jun Linger's eyes grew redder, and tears came to her eyes. But she just insulted my mother as a bitch. First elder paused and frowned. He disliked Xiao Yikan even more. Even though master was not grandfather Jun's biological son, he was still master of the Jun family. But she was so arrogant as to insult master's wife. Linger, first elder sighed, though I want to stand by your side, we have to consider Xiao Yikan's identity. I can't help it, let's just forget about it, alright. Jun Ling's body froze. Her mother was humiliated, but she had to forget about it. No, no way. Xiao Yikan jumped out from behind first elder, held her head high and looked down haughtily at Jun Linger. This woman bumped into me and tried to beat me. She must apologize to me. Miss Xiao, first elder looked sullen, don't go too far. Linger is also a granddaughter of old master. He raised her up and has a deep affection for her. Chapter 1522. Arrogance of a Counterfeit 5. Xiao Yikan snorted with contempt. How can a god granddaughter compare with a biological granddaughter? Also, do you know how I lived during these years in the outside world? My mother died after giving birth to me. If my adoptive mother didn't take me in, I wouldn't have survived. However, my adoptive father's family background is weak, so do you know how much ridicule I received? Yet, someone illegitimate like Jun Linger occupied my spot and enjoyed my affections. What did you say? Eldest elder's originally impatient expression turned furious. You said old family head's daughter is already dead. Who killed a member of my Jun family? Xiao Yikan humphed. If it weren't for grandfather Jun abandoning my mother and causing her to not have enough money to treat her illness, she wouldn't have passed away after giving birth to me. Her words portrayed herself in a very tragic light. Eldest elder was originally dissatisfied with her but had turned sympathetic to her plight. No wonder she had such a large unfavorable impression of the Jun family and Jun Linger. It was because she suffered through all sorts of misfortune outside and everything was caused by the Jun family. Linger, eldest elder turned to Jun Linger, hesitation in his speech. Jun Linger tightly clutched her fists, disbelief clear in her eyes. Eldest elder, you want to make me apologize? Linger, our Jun family has caused her to suffer an abundance of tribulations. Consider this apology to be on behalf of the Jun family for abandoning her mother and her for so many years. Eldest elder turned away, not daring to look at Jun Linger's dejected eyes in fear of turning soft. Jun Linger closed her eyes and took a deep breath before opening them again. I understand. Her sight slowly landed on Xiao Yikan's gloating face. She had to use all of her willpower to suppress the desire to throw a punch at her. I'm sorry. She tightly bit her lips, her face turning pale. Will this do? Xiao Yikan's face was taken over by a self-pleased smile. Jun Linger, you must remember, I am the rightful miss of the Jun family. Everything that I do, your Jun family owes me. Jin Linger did not respond. She swiftly walked around Xiao Yikan and headed towards the East Court. At that moment, her tears could not be held back any longer and streamed down unbidden, splashing into the air. Watching Jun Linger's disappearing silhouette, pain seized the first elder's heart. He took a sharp breath and turned to darkly look at Xiao Yikan. Old family head has always doted on Linger and raised her with him since she was young, so don't go too far. Otherwise, even if the Jun family owes you, us elders will still kick you out. Xiao Yikan snorted without care and walked past the eldest elder with swaying hips, without gracing him with a single glance. Bang! Inside the room, young Luo Feng was sitting beside a table and reading a book. When the room's door was pushed open, she looked up and saw the tearful Jun Linger entering. Wah! Unable to hold it back, Jun Linger burst into loud sobs, wanting to relieve herself of all of the grievances that she suffered today. Young Luo Feng put down the book in her hand and asked with raised brows, what happened? Sister Yun, Jun Linger sobbingly responded, is having the bloodline of the Jun family truly that important? It was obviously not my fault, but why am I forced to apologize? If that woman didn't ridicule my mother, I wouldn't want to hit her. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification for any new updates. For every 100 new subscribers, we will have a mass release of the ongoing novel updates. Thank you for listening to our content. Chapter 1523. Arrogance of a Counterfeit 6. Hearing her words, young Luo Feng immediately guessed that Jun Linger must have been bullied by Xiao Yikan. And because of blood relations, the Jun family sided with Xiao Yikan. Let's go. Young Luo Feng languidly stretched and walked outside. Sister Yun, where are you going? Taking a walk. Young Luo Feng did not say anything else and left. She could hear the sounds of an argument from far away. A man's gentle voice, tinged with fury, drifted to her ears. Xiao Yikan, don't you think you went too far? Linger is at least a granddaughter recognized by grandfather, aren't you afraid your actions will provoke everyone's anger? Young Master Hua. In contrast, Xiao Yikan's tone was bashful with a trace of displeasure. Don't worry about me, I'm more important than Jun Linger, so why would the Jun family grow angry toward me due to an outsider? Young Luo Feng's steps halted, a faint smile appearing on her features. Linger, do you think Xiao Yikan is truly dumb or pretending to be dumb? Hua Yifei was standing up for Jun Linger, so he sought Xiao Yikan out for retribution, but his actions turned into worrying for her in her words. Could it be that there was something wrong with her head? Jun Linger subconsciously pulled on Young Luo Feng. Sister Yun, let's go elsewhere for a walk. I don't want to see Xiao Yikan. Young Luo Feng's smile was wicked as she pushed away Jun Linger's hand and walked toward Hua Yifei and Xiao Yikan. Inside the garden, Xiao Yikan's face was blushing from shyness while Hua Yifei's face was red from rage, and his knuckles were cracking from how tight his fists were. If the other person's status was not a hindrance, perhaps his fists would have already made contact with her head. What did you come here for? Looking up, Xiao Yikan caught sight of the approaching Young Luo Feng and Jun Linger and frowned, her tone full of impatience. Can't you see I am having a date with young Master Hua? Her words were clearly intended to agitate Jun Linger. After all, she already looked into it. Hua Yifei had lost his parents when he was young and came to the Jun family to rely on his mother's younger sister. He also had an engagement with Jun Linger. An orphan like Hua Yifei must have befriended Jun Linger in order to latch onto the Jun family. And since her status was higher than Jun Linger's now, Hua Yifei would certainly abandon Jun Linger and want to take her as his wife. Even if Hua Yifei did not have this intention, after grandfather Jun returned she would have him force them apart. How could Jun Linger dare to disobey? Linger. Hua Yifei's heart jolted and he hurriedly walked to Jun Linger and hastily explained, it absolutely isn't what she said. I came to seek retribution from her. I know. How could she not know her cousin's character? There was no way that this man would betray her. Hua Yifei visibly relaxed. He was worried that Jun Linger would believe in this bitch's attempt at driving a wedge between them. Humph. Seeing that Hua Yifei had his eyes completely focused on Jun Linger, Xiao Yikan's face instantly darkened. Both of you are merely god-granddaughters of my grandfather. Yet you dare to be this impolite in front of me, the true miss. Believe me when I say that I can make the Jun family kick you out. It was enough that Xiao Yikan was insulting Hua Yifei and Jun Linger, but she idiotically ran to Young Luo Feng and angrily shouted while pointing at them. Thus, the snow-white girl suddenly lifted her leg and a kick landed on Xiao Yikan's chest with a bang. Chapter 1524. Grandfather Jun has returned 1. Silence descended on the whole garden. Jun Linger clasped her mouth with shock, her face reddening from excitement. Pleasure rushed through her heart and it was as though her anger was vented without restraint. It was not until the bang resounded through the air that the servants around them reacted and dashed toward the screeching Xiao Yikan. However, no one knew whether it was on purpose or on accident. The leading maidservant was walking fine but suddenly her left foot stepped on her right foot, and she tripped and fell into Xiao Yikan. Bang! The maidservant knocked into Xiao Yikan's head, causing Xiao Yikan to be dazed from the pain. When she uneasily regained her senses, she furiously shouted, "You damn girl, do you know how to walk?" The little maidservant appeared as though she was extremely frightened and her face was deathly pale. She fearfully answered, "Miss Xiao, it was an accident. This servant was only too worried about Miss, so I accidentally tripped. I beg Miss to forgive me." Xiao Yikan's face was brimming with anger. She was about to say something, but an "ah" was heard from the side. She unconsciously wanted to dodge, but the servant on top of her had not moved yet. This servant did not land on Xiao Yikan. After all, men and women should exercise prudence with other sex, and Xiao Yikan was of the Jun family bloodline, so he only impacted Xiao Yikan's arm. Tears streamed down Xiao Yikan's face from the pain, her eyes were red, and she could not speak. The other maidservants and servants followed their example and all accidentally injured Xiao Yikan before instantly kneeling on the ground and mercilessly banging their heads against the ground, admitting to their error. Evidently, even the servants of the Jun family could not tolerate Xiao Yikan's arrogance anymore. Comparing her with the lively and witty Junlinger, they naturally chose to side with Junlinger. In the worst case they would be punished. The Jun family was fairly reasonable and would not normally torture or kill house servants unless the servant committed a crime that betrayed the family. From this alone it could be seen that Junlinger was very well liked inside the Jun family, otherwise the servants would not do something so risky like venting her anger out for her. Junlinger was moved. How could she not understand that these people were doing this on her behalf? "What are you all doing?" Abruptly, a cold shout was heard. The servants all hurriedly stood up and then simultaneously kneeled on the ground. Junzan approached in brocade robes with a strict and icy expression, imposing in demeanor. The person standing beside him was Eldest Elder. Currently, the Eldest Elder was frowning as his cold eyes swept over the crowd of kneeling servants. "Who can tell me what happened?" Junzan surveyed the surroundings before coldly asking. In truth, he had a fair understanding of the Jun family servants, and they would not commit a transgression against their superiors unless the other person did something unbearable. Wah! Finally free, Xiao Yikan burst into a wail. She wanted to stand up from the ground, but she could feel her whole body aching like she was about to fall apart. "The Jun family is bullying me." She was tightly clutching her arm, and her face was bruised all over. It was evident how uninhibited the servants were with their accidents. Junzan glanced at Junlinger and young Luo Feng, who were standing off to the side, with a frown. He was about to ask his daughter when Xiao Yikan's malice-filled voice spoke up. Chapter 1525. Grandfather Jun has returned too. Junzan, as the family head of the Jun family, will you allow evil servants to assault people as they please? Xiao Yikan was trembling from her anger. These lowly slaves dared to hit me, I want them to pay with their life immediately. Junzan's frown deepened. Miss Xiao, even if you are my master's blood descendant, I am still the head of the Jun family. It is discourteous and unacceptable for you to call me by my name. Also, my Jun family has its own family rules. They did commit a wrong and should be punished, but they do not deserve death. Why? Hearing this, Xiao Yikan jumped up. Why can't they die? As slaves, their duty is to be loyal to their masters. A slave that dares to hit his master should be cut into pieces and die without an intact corpse. A maidservant appeared to be angered by Xiao Yikan's words and courageously refuted, this servant's master is old family head as well as Miss Linger. Look at this vermin. Xiao Yikan pointed at the maidservant and her eyes looked like she wanted to eat people. Fine, if you won't kill her, then I will kill her. I would like to see if this bitch dares to resist. Swish. After saying those words, Xiao Yikan pulled the sword out from a guard's hand and furiously stormed toward the maidservant. Bitch, since you want to vent the anger of Junlinger, who has been freeloading off of the Jun family, then I will kill you and make you understand who is your master. The maidservant was deathly pale from terror and closed her eyes. Stop. Junzan grew furious and was about to go up to stop her when a white figure darted before the maidservant and raised her leg, sending Xiao Yikan flying back with a bang again. The sword in Xiao Yikan's hands clattered to the ground. Xiao Yikan spat out a mouthful of blood, fire shooting from her eyes. I haven't sought retribution from you yet, but you dare to hit me again. Who do you think you are? You are nothing but my grandfather's god-granddaughter. I am the true miss of the Jun family. You are staying at my home but you dare to hurt me. The girl's white robe fluttered in the breeze and a smile was on her exceptional face. However, her smile was eerie and chilly, causing people to shiver from the bottom of their heart. I'm merely disciplining you for Grandfather Jun. For Grandfather Jun. Junlinger was startled and looked up at young Luo Feng with astonishment. She had been curious from the start about why someone like young Luo Feng would settle accounts with Xiao Yikan on her behalf. It turned out she was doing it for Grandfather. However, Besides recognizing her as his granddaughter, grandfather had not helped her with anything else, so why did she hold grandfather in such esteem? Suddenly, Zheng Linger recalled something, and realization dawned on her. That's right. Initially, grandfather thought she was dead and invaded the Poison Valley to avenge her. Although the Poison Valley was not a match for grandfather, the Poison Valley was still a power from Central Province. Sister Jun did not know the relationship between the governor's estate of Central Province and grandfather, so she must think grandfather offended a power from Central Province for her. This was why she would stand forward and protect her at a time like this. Zheng Linger was moved, but more than that, she was saddened. Why wasn't such a perfect sister young grandfather's granddaughter? Why did it have to be the darn Xiao Yikan? Ho ho. Xiao Yikan snorted and sneered with ridicule, an outsider like you dares to say you are disciplining me for my grandfather. I wonder what gave you the courage to say something like that. Slap. Right after Xiao Yikan stood up, young Luo Feng flashed in front of Xiao Yikan again and a crisp slap reverberated in the garden.